You know, at this point we should just call it the Soulsborne Cinematic Universe, because every game company and ambitious solo dev seems to want to try and make their take on the FromSoft-style RPG. Every open world game now has some dodge rolling, a stamina bar, and a big boss fight, but Monster Hunter, they didn't just copy the basics here, they basically stole the entire premise of Elden Ring. That brings us to Monster Hunter Wilds, the latest in a long, proud line of games that just couldn't resist chasing that Elden Ring clout. I'll talk a bit more about the story in a later section in case some of you care about spoilers in a Souls-like for some reason, but for now let me set the scene. You're sent to lands previously thought uninhabited, with a culture and ecosystem based around strange natural phenomena. In order to progress and uncover what's actually going on, you'll have to defeat the various bosses, increase your strength, and progress through the open world. Each region contains an apex monster, which is basically the end goal to kill to consider the region complete. And while you do it, you'll have a woman who follows you around and offers guidance. Now, inherently, there's nothing wrong with reusing a working formula in a game where story comes second, so this was just to get us on the same page. But now I want to talk about gameplay. This is where my biggest complaints with the game start. They tried way too hard to match Elden Ring, but failed in understanding the fundamental systems that make the game so great. First of all, the weapon variety is terrible, with only 14 weapons compared to Elden Ring's 308, and that's without counting the DLC. These weapons also lean way too hard into special moves, and I think they're bugged because attacking doesn't deplete your stamina. The weapon balance is also all over the place. The sword and shield, for instance, is insanely fast, your movement inputs will actually move you during attacks, and it has a shield, which blocking in this game is insanely strong, so they copied that right, I guess. In comparison to the sword and shield, something like the greatsword is completely unviable. You swing it like you're trying to throw a mini fridge, you can't move during attacks, and it doesn't do great damage. Another weapon is not only a reskin, but literally doesn't work. It's called the Charge Blade, but apparently it runs on double A's because after a few swings, the sword icon starts flashing red like a dying Wii remote, and then you just bounce off the monster like you're using a plastic toy. I guess I forgot to plug my weapon in last night. The only thing that will work at this point is mount attacks and your special riposte-like move you can do on wounds. It's annoying just remembering it. But this makes a good transition into the absolutely broken wound system. So basically, like Elden Ring, if you hit a boss enough, it can stagger and you'll get a big damage attack. Only they kind of combined the two systems. So if you attack the same place enough, you open a wound. Then if you use a special attack, it will break that wound, dealing massive damage. The problem is, you can make multiple wounds, and for the entire duration of the special attack, the boss will just sit there and take it. If these 5-second mini stuns aren't enough, breaking some wounds will also full stun a monster. This can lead to moments where you essentially stun a boss for the entire fight. And if you thought co-op trivialized Elden Ring, oh boy, wait until you try this game with even one friend. The wound system turns every boss fight into a group mugging. Now, I don't want to be unfair to this game. There's a lot of promise here, and trying to compare anything to Elden Ring is already a big ask. But the game invited the comparison by being so similar. So, I'm going to talk about the story very briefly now, and then talk about what I like, and what I think needs to be changed for the game's future. So, the story, let's talk about it. The people of this mystic land tried to pull a Seath the Scaleless and create life. These experiments resulted in the tragedy that brought us to the land in the first place, and also the glowing, creamy coloring of certain monsters. Yeah, whatever. At the heart of it all, you discover that the crazy phenomena of each place is actually caused by this big tree thing, and while they built their entire landscape around what it does, no one knows that it has a big parasite dragon living inside of it, which is causing disasters to be way more common. So yeah, the final boss is basically the Elden Beast. It's a parasite living inside of the thing that is controlling the ecosystem and the whole world's culture. Now, I don't want this video to be all negative, so here's the things it does right. The game took some of the best ideas of Dark Souls 2. The weapons have a lot of different reskins, you can fight bosses even after you've beaten them once, There's an entire system to make sure that you still get rewarded for doing so. The crafting is much more fleshed out than Elden Ring, as you can craft not only consumable items, but also entire sets of armor or weapons. Also, it allows for up to 4-player co-op, and any game that lets you play with your friends is always more fun. I do think invasions should have been added, as the game at its core is far too easy, but given this mechanic is controversial in Elden Ring, I understand shying away from it. The combat itself is fun when you actually get to fight and the boss isn't stunned forever. They clearly put a ton of love into the graphics and animation, if you're a console player or rich enough to be able to appreciate that. Overall, the biggest changes I would suggest for gameplay is to make it so that wound attacks have a cooldown for stunning bosses. That won't stop them from falling over, but it will help, and I like having to aim my attacks precisely, so I'd rather this than making wounds harder to make. I also would like to see some multi-enemy bosses. They have a system where monsters can travel in packs, but it's like they chickened out, so you can use an item to get rid of them. Imagine if you could just use an item and banish smell. So, yeah. Overall, this game has potential, and it's definitely fun, but in its current state, it is a terrible Elden Ring ripoff. It's a good Monster Hunter game, though.